Hey guys, Kyle here. So, just before the show starts, I wanted to mention our Patreon. You can pay us $1 a month as a thank you, as a tip. You can pay $2 a month to get access to one of our bonus content shows, episodes 2 days early, and a secret Discord chat where all of our Patreon donors get to go and hang out and talk with us directly. Then there's a $5 tier that you can donate to get access to a whole bunch more content. We have multiple bonus episodes on there. So please check it out. Patreon.com/itgetsweird. We don't advertise, we don't make money. So check it out and throw us some money if you think that would be cool. Thanks.
Welcome to It Gets Weird, our comedy show where we explore the unusual, the unbelievable, and the unexplained to try to make your world a little weirder. I'm Nile.
And I'm Kyle. Nile, I am
Yes.
so... First of all, it's good to talk to you, as always.
Yeah.
You know, it's like certain weeks it lines up where, like, you have to do your bonus episodes, so we're not doing X-Files. It get on for our Patreon together, and we don't talk for a little bit, and, you know, we both have really busy, like, weekdays, and... So I'm glad that we get to catch up this way because I need to tell you, I did it. I finally did it. I've been talking about it for a while to you in private, but I decided I'm signing up for the Neuralink Elon Musk human trials.
Oh, good. You made the decision. Yeah. We were going back and forth about it, and
I wasn't sure.
We both decided that neither of us cared if you died. And you said you decided that you were going to go for it. Yeah, that's good.
I don't remember. There's a little bit of a part of that statement that you just made that I don't recall from our conversation.
No,
but we can talk about that.
I thought we were on the same page. Okay.
Yeah, I'm going with the other day I have like a news feed thing that pops up on my phone sometimes. I usually ignore it, but it popped up for me because there was something relevant. It was like something that caught my interest. And on that feed, there was a nice little image of a person with, I can only describe it as a hole in the top of their head that had a thing being inserted into it. And it was supposedly something to do with Elon Musk's Neuralink. And I saw that and I thought, that's for me.
That's sick as fuck. That is what the kids would call dope, I believe.
Thank you. Yes. And you know, the other thing that I thought was really good about it is how many chimps it killed. There was like that whole thing that came out where all these, although I looked into it and it was like, I think it was like over 1,200, like it's not specific about the types of animals. So I was kind of sitting there, I was like wondering like, well, what if it's not just like, what if it was like 2, maybe 3 chimps and then the rest were like God's little delicate creatures like hummingbirds and butterflies, and that's you know, things with like low lifespans, and he's just fucking they killing those, you know.
They did surgery and put a neural link on a grape.
Yes,
and it died. It died. It turned into a little bit of wine. It auto fermented. It was really fucked up.
They had a doctor there, and they were like, "I don't really know how to say this or even explain this, but it died as if a creature died, not like how a grape would die typically. Although it
died like a dog.
It died like a dog
street
in a ditch.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm excited for that, and you know, I'm hoping I'm crossing my fingers that it doesn't kill me immediately. So
yeah.
I don't know if that's a good segue for your topic, but I figured I'd bring it up because I'm very stoked.
See, I actually had something for the beginning of the episode.
Oh, well, go ahead.
Because I'm currently living in Dune on the East Coast over here. Have you heard about this?
Oh shit! Wait, hold on a second. Is that how it is over there?
It's not the worst here, but yesterday I was driving within like a couple miles of New York City, and that was like the joke online of it being the world turned on the like racist Middle Eastern or Mexican filter from movies is 100% true. It looked like the apocalypse was going down. I kept waiting for like a lightning to strike and the silhouette of like a kaiju to appear in it. You know,
my God,
that was
crazy.
the vibe. It was absolutely nuts. If anyone, it's the Canadian wildfire stuff, putting a bunch of soot and everything in the air. Air condition. We're not supposed to go outside until at least like Saturday, really.
Oh my God.
To speak of.
I mean,
without
even
like
here,
N95.
Even here in Indiana, I was getting notifications on my phone that were like, you know, don't go outside. Air, whatever the term is, the air quality is at like 150, and I looked at the numbers, and it's like 150 is pretty bad.
Yeah,
so
we were at like 180, I think, was the number, and 200 is like really bad.
Cool.
So that's a fun world we live in.
Love the future. Do you have something fun to kind of lighten up the we went from fucking Elon Musk to apocalyptic wildfires. Like, what do you got for me?
Well, Kyle, I'm glad you asked, because today I want to do this turned out to be a weirder story to try to unravel than I expected.
I mean,
because
that's perfect for us, right? Like,
yeah,
that's what we want.
We'll get into it. So, Kyle, have you seen the movie The Exorcist?
Yeah, I have.
You have talked about the whole curse of the movie The Exorcist on a episode like a couple years ago.
That was a while ago, because that was a series of movies that were like quote unquote haunted or cursed by demons or the devil. I think like The Omen is on that list, and Poltergeist are some of the other ones that we talked about. But The Exorcist is definitely one that comes up. Why do you ask?
Yeah. Well, have you ever heard about the real life story behind The Exorcist?
I think I've heard a bit about it. Yes.
Okay.
But here's the thing. Here's the beauty of that. I have the most dog shit memory of anybody I know. So I know I've heard the story before. I don't really remember how it goes. I'm assuming there was an exorcism and that somebody died during that exorcism or something. But beyond that, I genuinely don't remember the specifics.
You've got one thing right. There were exorcisms performed.
Okay.
What I found, I don't even remember how I got on this topic. I think I was trying to do like a haunting. Oh, that's what it was. There's a reason why, which we'll get into later. That's a fun little reveal. There was a little tangent that led into this episode for me. But I started reading, and there is more to the reality of this situation, to the point where I'm still not 100% that I know exactly what happened. Because the story of The Exorcist is very entwined with the popularity of the movie. And because of that, there are documentaries out there that you really can't treat as documentaries very much.
Okay.
And we're going to get into all this. So, to put the Exorcist movie is based on a book written by William Peter Blatty, I believe the guy's name is. He wrote this book. It became kind of a popular thing. They adapted it into a movie, but the book that the movie is based on is supposedly based on some journals of a Catholic priest who did exorcisms. Supposedly William Peter Blatty got access to these journals that tell the story of a real life exorcism, and he used that as inspiration for this book that became the seminal horror classic.
And you're telling me that I have to maybe take his accounts that he has procured with a grain of salt? Is that it?
Yeah. We will dissect this as we move along. I kind of have this structured in a way that there will be kind of reveals as we go. So we're gonna start with an overview of the story and where we started getting basically the first people to really dig into the real story. This you'll find called a couple different things. Some places will call it the St. Louis Exorcism. Some places will call it the Exorcism of Roland Doe, or Robbie Mannheim is another name that gets associated with this person. Both of those are basically stand-in names so that they didn't reveal the name of the person. All of those names. So those names are not real.
Okay.
But they do have clues to the real name that we'll get to later. I'm going to not actually dox the person because I do have their full name and address.
Oh, wow.
That is a thing that is supposedly out there right now. But I'm not going to give I'm not going to like give the person's full I guess it's the address they grew up at, but we supposedly now know who the Exorcist is based on, and that has been uncovered over the last 40 years.
But you don't feel comfortable saying their name?
No, we'll say their name because I have information. It's very public. It's out there, but I'm not going to give like. There's an address to their like the house that it all, and you can find this shit online. Like, but I don't feel comfortable just giving out like putting that far on blast. Anyway, so supposedly this was he was 14 in the late 1940s. I believe the events mainly took place in the year 1949. He was 14 at the time, and the events were recorded by the attending priest Raymond J. Bishop. But there are a couple other people, Father Walter H. Halloran, and a couple other priests have been kind of over the years since then have been told stories of this event and have been used as sources for information about this actual exorcism.
Halloran's a familiar name.
Yeah, that Halloran, Doc Halloran is in a horror movie. What horror movie is that? I don't.
Oh, I thought you were like quizzing me. I thought you were like, snap,
no,
snap,
I was
Kyle.
trying to remember.
Well, you do your thing. I can.
Yeah.
Let me take a look.
So the real story first started to get some publicity and everything because of an article in the Washington Post, which reported in August 1949 that priests in the area of I believe at the time these exorcisms were happening down in St. Louis, I think. Because basically the story starts in the DC metro area, and then they moved to St. Louis to a convent down there, to a place that has like exorcisms later on for a bit for more exorcisms, and then ended up back in Maryland.
Do you sorry, I thought you were going to go for more exorcisms. Check out the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
Do you want to know what horror movie he's in?
Yes.
Behind the Mask: The Rise of Leslie Vernon.
That's it.
Yeah.
It is. Okay.
I haven't seen that in so long. I feel like we're due for a rewatch.
I watched. So that's actually one of the movies that when I met Jules, like she loved it, and I was like, "You've heard of this movie? Like this is a movie you know and love? Oh my god!" And I've watched it probably either 1 or 2 Halloweens ago at this point. But I'm always down for a rewatch. There's like a Scream Factory Blu-ray that came out that I really want to get. I just haven't yet. That movie rules.
I don't think I've seen that since like maybe high school. It's been a long.
It's really fun.
I know you showed it to me. Like, I think you watched it first, and then you were like, "You need to see this." So maybe it was early college, but I do remember us watching that together. I think in your parents' old house.
Okay, so, I can see that.
That's my memory.
A lot of stuff from that time was in your parents' basement.
Yeah, I know.
But I think you're right that one wasn't. Anyway, so yeah, we'll talk more about Halloran later.
I can remember the specific houses we were in when we watched horror movies in high school, but I can't tell you the fucking details of the Exorcist story that I definitely had told to me probably maybe 2 years ago. So
well, don't worry about it because there's a lot to talk about.
Cool.
I have some stuff for you as we move along here. So those reports were still in Maryland because the source for those reports were the family's former pastor, Luther Miles Schultz, who becomes kind of the initial church person in this story. So he's the first priest that gets contacted about this boy supposedly being possessed because they already knew this priest. That was their priest, and they consulted him first. And according to various accounts, a total of 48 people witnessed the actual the exorcism that was happening at the time they were reporting on. So it was witnessed by quite a few people, and 9 of them were Jesuits, which I don't really know what that has to do with anything. It's just a detail that gets put in like all of the reports about this. They do talk more about like Jesuit priests a little bit later, but I don't think, unless I'm missing something, it's not crucial to the story.
Sorry, you said 49 people?
48.
48? I mean, sorry, I'm just like, my brain this entire time has been picturing like the room in the movie The Exorcist where the little girl is. So now I'm picturing 48 people just crowded around a bed. And that can't be right, I don't think.
I believe this one happened in a church.
Oh, okay. Okay.
They were brought to a church. So a lot of this starts to come out. The report first starts to get kind of put together by a guy named Thomas B. Allen. He ended up writing kind of the book on the real life case that inspired The Exorcist.
It sounds like Thomas B. Wrighton.
Yeah. I believe that book came out in like the late 70s or something. Like it's closer. There's a documentary based on it that came out in 1997. So this book was around a little bit earlier, and is kind of the definitive. Thomas B. Allen is the definitive scholar on the case for quite a while in the public eye. Like people always just reference his book as if you believe in exorcism, that's what actually happened. Yes.
Okay, I see.
That is the canonical text for quite a while. And he specifically did talk to Father Walter H. Halloran, who is one of the last surviving eyewitnesses of the events and actually participated in the exorcism. He kept a diary along with Father Raymond J. Bishop that detailed the exorcism performed on who was pseudonymously identified as Roland Doe or Robbie Mannheim.
I'm just still so hung up on how many people are attending this exorcism. Like, are they summoning a spirit bomb like Goku? Like they're lending their energy to the exorcism, or just watching?
I believe it's like this feels like those surgical centers where you have the people doing, and then the rest of them are just like around, like monitoring and watching and learning, you know?
That's
exorcism exorcism isn't a thing that is like that everyone is trained on, and there's not a lot of opportunities to train on it. So I feel like whenever it happens, everyone tries to go, and it's like the biggest, weirdest thing happening in Catholicism at any given time.
Fair. The thing is, like, if you are kind of like me, and you think that like possession, demonic possession and stuff is usually more like a psychosomatic or psychological thing, or sometimes even like physical illness. I feel like the worst thing you could do is crowd 48 people around this person, like watching them. Like that seems like it would make the possession worse. But what do I know?
It's definitely possible. I don't know how all that shit works. If there is like a belief point in it, then maybe having more believers in the room will help you. I truly don't know.
And I'm just arguing to look at it without, like, let's pretend religion doesn't exist. You know, like, what are we doing to this poor person?
Yeah. So the story that I'm about to get into is basically the account as in close to the way that Allen's book told it. So this is the story that you will find for like a long time after this book comes out and everything. It begins in the late 1940s in suburban Washington, D.C. in a suburb called Mount Rainier. A 13-year-old boy who is referred to as we've said, with epithets of Roland Doe and Robbie Mannheim, has been going through a tragedy. His Aunt Harriet, who was a spiritualist and kind of started to teach him how to use a Ouija board and get basic like spiritualism stuff, was impressed upon Roland at a young age by this aunt, who then died and left him very upset. Like this was a very bad time for the kid's life. And shortly after Harriet's death in early January 1949, Roland started to experience things. He would hear sounds coming from the floors and walls of his rooms that sounded like scratching. Water would start to drip from pipes and walls without really any explanation. And his mattress would just move suddenly while he's like in it, or sometimes not, but like it would just move.
Now, Harriet is such an aunt name, isn't it?
Yes.
It's
especially like your spiritualist Aunt Harriet.
Yeah. You hear somebody's named Harriet and you assume they're somebody's aunt. I had an Aunt Harriet, and I remember her fondly. She would bake very delicious cookies, but So, as far as I'm concerned, there's like, if you're named Harriet, then your lot in life is you are predestined to be an ant. Yeah. And I mean,
always
like,
a bridesmaid, never a bride type situation.
Yeah, I mean,
You're
like,
always gonna be the ant.
You know how like uncles have a vibe, ants have a vibe, and so you're just gonna have that vibe forever. Sorry, Harriets. Do you think anybody's naming their kid Harriet in 2023?
Probably. That feels like a name that has like. I think some of the stanks off it now. Like, not that there was ever there was never like, this is such an extreme example. I'm sorry, this is what came to mind. There was never a Hitler where people just stopped using the name entirely.
Yeah, but maybe some people are just like, oh fuck, I don't want my kid to grow up to be a spy.
Yeah.
Like or an ant.
I would be curious how that impacted, because that was a big book when I was a kid. There was the Disney Channel, not Disney Channel, Nickelodeon movie with Rosie O'Donnell in it. I love that. Any book about like kid detectives, I read like every single
that tracks.
Other than Hardy Boys.
Yeah, you do not strike me as a Hardy Boys, but you definitely I see. I was the kid who would read anything to do with magic and quests and like swords. But
we've bonded over our shared love of Del Toro
that's
Quest
true.
Many times.
That's true. Del Toro Quest was the shit.
I was a Three Detectives kid instead of a Hardy Boys kid.
I remember that. I never read those.
Yeah. They were fun. I have not read one in probably 20 years.
I mean, that's when you're supposed to read them, so you're all good, But I was a Goosebumps and Del Toro Quest kid. But Harriet. I noticed that these like names that seem like they're for older people, like grandparents, are coming back. Because I actually have a friend who's kid who's like, I think, I don't know how old she is, like probably almost 2 years old ish. But her name's Evelyn. And that's kind of like, I don't know. That's like
that's a little bit of an old-fashioned name.
It's a little bit of an old-fashioned name. So maybe it's coming back. Maybe it's a thing again. We're in a cycle.
We're bringing back grandma names.
What's the grandparent name that you would bring back if you had the power?
I honestly think Ernest needs a second run. Like the whole like, I realized that the Ernest Goes To series like kind of fucked it for a while because it's so intrinsically like linked to a farcical character. It's like naming your kid Magoo for a British person, but not just assuming that British people have no idea who Ernest is. Anyway,
it's like I don't want to name my kid Harriet. She's gonna grow up to be a spy. I don't want to name my kid Ernest. What if he goes to summer camp or jail?
He's gonna get scared stupid.
He's gonna get scared stupid. I'm thinking, look, I'm biased because this is my grandfather's name, but I think we got to bring back Harold. I think it's time.
Okay.
I think it's time for Harold to make a comeback.
A nice Harry sometimes, Harry. But Harold, I can see it.
Yeah.
So the family of the kid, the Ronald family, started to seek the help of any expert they could.
Ronald would be a good one.
Ronald would be a good name to come back.
Sorry.
Doctors, psychiatrists, they started just to kind of do everything they could, and eventually contacted their local Lutheran minister, Schultz, the guy that I mentioned earlier. And he couldn't do a lot to help them because he is not an exorcist. But so he told them to seek the assistance of the Jesuits, which led them to Father E. Albert Hughes, a local Catholic. I think he has ties. I think he's a Jesuit priest, but I think Jesuit like a subdivision of Catholicism. I honestly don't know.
The actual worst possible person.
I know. I know that you don't know this.
I was just about to ask what a Jesuit is because I don't really know.
It's a specific subdivision, and I forget what it's a subdivision of. If it's
I'm
like
assuming
a thing that is out. Probably.
It's got to be, right?
That would make the most sense for this story, so I'm going to go with that.
Okay.
Catholicism is a thing that I only really know about through like shame. I don't know I know about it through movies, and they don't really clarify what the fuck a Jesuit is very much in movies. Yeah. But like, I read too many Daredevil comics, so I have a very skewed version of Catholicism.
That'll do it.
So Father E. Albert Hughes comes in and joins the whole story. He went and asked his superior's permission to perform an exorcism on the boy in February of 1949. The church granted this request, and he strapped the boy to a mattress and began recitations. He eventually had to stop when the boy broke off a piece of the mattress spring and slashed the priest across his shoulders and like cut him, leaving the exorcism unfinished. A few days later, the red scratches started to appear on the boy, and one of them formed the word Louis or Louis, which indicated to the mother of this boy that the family needed to go to St. Louis, where they had relatives, and that's where the Aunt Harriet had lived, I guess.
Okay,
that was where they went to save their son.
I thought it was going to be like, you need to seek Louis Anderson.
Yeah, you gotta get some. What is Louis? Louis Anderson's like actually a comic. I only know him as a fucking punchline. What does he do?
Yeah, I mean, comedic acting is mostly what I know him for, but he was in oh god, what's the Zach Galifianakis clown show? He was great.
Yeah. Baskets.
That's what it was.
I forgot that was
great
him.
in that. He's great in that show.
Yeah.
Rest in peace.
This is such a, oh my god, there's such a fucking brainworm here. I
All right.
am realizing that I had conflated two people in my brain for a while on and off, like in a way that like if I thought about it, I knew they were two separate people, but there's this like disconnect of which one's which.
I know exactly what you're describing. I've done that before. Is this Louis Anderson and who?
The reason that they're linked is because they both are used similarly by the nerd community as a punchline, because the other person is Gabe Newell. They're both heavyset people involved in the entertainment industry that nerd people reference as a punchline.
But they have so many
they have nothing in common.
Defining traits, and there's nothing in common.
There's absolutely nothing that ties them other than being like a fat phobic punchline, and that sucks.
Well, Gabe Newell. Well, okay.
Hey, we all try to we all unlearn our biases only through reflection and time. So
it's true.
I'm learning here.
Let me help you. This is not going to help at all. Gabe Newell. He kind of talks like, I'm Gabe Newell.
Yeah.
And Louis Anderson talks like this, kind of, that's very exaggerated.
Yeah. And one works. Does he work for Valve?
Yeah, he's like he's like the founder of Valve. He packaged he put together every single orange box himself.
Yeah, he built those boxes.
He fucking did that, and he delivered everybody's fucking Steam decks directly to their doorsteps. And he's like, "Hi, I'm Gabe Newell. I'm here to deliver your Steam Deck. I hope you enjoy Team Fortress 3. And then Louis Anderson he's just like comedic actor. He did like he did some sort of game show thing too, I think.
Yeah, he was on like Family Feud.
But he was fun. He was a funny guy, and like I said, amazing in baskets. So, anyways, sorry.
Yeah, that's my weird specific like niche nerd brainworm thing. God damn. So, yeah, they got granted an exorcism. He broke off a piece of a mattress spring and attacked the priest, leaving it unfinished. So they decided to pack up and go down to St. Louis to try to get some stuff sorted. A cousin of the family was attending St. Louis University at the time, and she put them in touch with Father Walter H. Halloran and Reverend William Bowden. And those became the two people who are both Jesuits, I guess. They were the two people that would perform an actual exorcism that went further, like that actually worked. So they became involved in the case at that point. They gathered at this residence that gets cited as being on Roanoke Avenue or Roanoke Drive, which is in Maryland in Mount Rainier, where they live, in early of March 1949, and they saw the scratching on the boy's body, and the mattress started to move violently. These were the things. Oh, sorry. This is where it gets confusing, because there are points where it gets referenced as these exorcisms happening in this house, and this house is in Maryland, but these exorcisms are taking place in St. Louis. So the storyline gets kind of conflicted here in terms of where exactly. I believe these exorcisms are taking place in the one that's happening right now in the story is happening in St. Louis. The other ones had been happening in
Maryland,
Mount Rainier, Maryland.
Okay.
So, yeah, they witnessed all these things happening. So the stuff basically had traveled with them from Maryland to St. Louis, and they were taking notes, figuring out what was happening here, trying to get an idea, kind of try to get a game plan together, and they started to notice a pattern in the boy's behavior. They said he was calm and normal during the day, but at night, after he settled in for bed, he would start to exhibit strange behaviors, including screaming and wild outbursts. He also would enter this trance-like state, and he would start making these sounds in like a low, rumbly, like, kind of like demon voice. And they would start to see these objects kind of flying around the room. And this is when like the weird shit started happening. The like more theatrical shit. Like the guy's head never turns around 360 degrees or anything, but you get some like flying objects and lots of shaking shit and sacred objects like flying away and everything.
Okay.
And yeah.
Very theatrical. Yep. Do you know what I'm about to ask you? Can you
no,
guess?
I don't. What is it?
These events escalate.
Mm-hmm.
His head doesn't turn 360 degrees. Does he vomit an ocean at any point?
Not an ocean. I do believe there is some stuff that'll happen in a minute that we'll talk about.
Okay.
I think he does kind of puke one time, but
okay.
I'm not. Okay. I don't. We'll get to it. This turns into like a multiple week long ordeal as they were monitoring this boy, figuring out what they were doing, and trying these different rituals and stuff to try to help him. Bowden reportedly saw an X appear in scratches on the boy's chest, which the priest believed to signify the number 10. And then in another incident, a pitchfork-shaped pattern of red lines started to go up the boy's thigh, and then went all the way down towards his ankle. So went like the full like length of this boy's leg.
And the idea,
these things happened. Yeah,
the idea is they're seeing these scratches appear before them, like they're present as these scratches like appear on the body, like miraculously, basically, is what they're saying.
Yes.
Okay,
yep.
All right.
These things would happen like every night for over a month. So this was like a long ongoing thing of monitoring, seeing all these things happening, trying to help him, not working, going back to the drawing board, monitoring, trying more shit. And the red X started to make them think that the kid was possessed by 10 demons.
Oh, okay. Okay, sure.
Which is like we've talked about. I think we've talked about with the other exorcism case that I talked about with Annalise Michel. Where they were like, oh, it's like Satan.
Yeah, she had
and
Judas
Hitler
and Hitler and Satan. She had all kinds of stuff going on.
Yeah. So the two priests never gave up. They continued night after night trying to exorcise this boy. And on the evening of March 20th, it went to a whole new level. The kid started just to piss all over his bed and shouting and cursing at the priests. And so at this point, since it had just continued to escalate, they decided they were going to take him to Alexian Brothers Hospital in St. Louis for a more rigorous, rigorous exorcism. And so he stayed there until April 18th, when a quote-unquote miracle occurred in the boy's room at the Alexian Brothers. It was the Monday after Easter, and he woke up in like the midst of a bunch of seizures, yelling at the priests, saying that Satan would always be with him. The priests then laid holy relics and crucifixes and medals and rosaries all over the boy. And at 10:45 that evening, the attending priests called on Saint Michael to expel Satan from the boy's body. They shouted at Satan, saying that Saint Michael would battle him for Roland's soul. 7 minutes later, he came out of his trance and just said, he's gone.
7 minutes.
Yes.
Interesting.
The boy then told them all about how he had a vision that Saint Michael was vanquishing Satan on a great battlefield. It is insinuated that this battle literally took place in fiery hell.
Okay.
And so after this, the boy was cured. He went on to live a pretty normal life, but ended up being the inspiration for one of the best films of all time. His family did come back to the East Coast. He eventually got married and started a family. There's claims that this should be verifiable now. I haven't tried to verify it, but they're in the point where people want it to be a really Catholic thing. They say that he named his first son Michael after the saint that saved him. But that I haven't confirmed. So William Bowdern died in 1983 after a lifelong of service to the Catholic Church. And Halloran lived until 2005 when he died of cancer. He was the last surviving member of the main team that had exorcised Roland Doe.
Damn. Okay.
Yeah, the entire Alexian Brothers Hospital was torn down in 1978. And the Thomas B. Allen book that came out and told this whole story came out in 1993. That was that's the second book. The first one was something else. He wrote two books, and one was like a continuation, new information uncovered type thing. So that book came out, and that led to a documentary in 1997 that kind of brought this story more towards the masses. And after years after the release of this book, Allen still completely just refused to give the name of the boy that was in the Halloran's diary that he had from doing research for his book. He said, soon after the book came out, a television show offered me $15,000 if I'd identify the kid. He said, I passed on it. During the research for my book, I sent the kid, then in his mid to late 50s, 2 letters to the address where I believed he lived. I never heard back from him, and I have to respect his privacy. So basically, he tried to do good by the now man and not put him out into the public without confirmation. But he did give some details on the house. He said it was simply a 2-story brick house set back behind a front yard lawn on a quiet street in a suburb a few miles northwest of St. Louis, is the St. Louis home. And then the one in Maryland he claimed was in Mount Rainier. I think there is an address that gets put around a lot online if you look it up. And it was 3210 Bunker Hill Road.
And you visited since?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
I think the home has been taken down since then. I don't know exactly. But this, that was the story for at least around 10 years before anyone started to really dig into it.
Oh, we're going to have a shakeup, huh?
Oh, we're not done.
I didn't think so.
So in some places cite this story as coming out in 1998, or 1999. There was a follow-up piece in 2000 that expanded on it. A writer named Mark Opsasnik wrote a thing entitled The Haunted Boy of Cottage City, the cold hard facts behind the story that inspired The Exorcist, for a magazine entitled Strange Magazine, which seems to be a Maryland-based Fortean magazine that had about 23 issues between 96 and 2005. As best as I can find out. That seems to be their operations. A lot of their stuff's behind a paywall because they went digital towards the end of their lifetime. And I didn't find a lot of information because it's not a huge publication. So he started to dig into the story because there was stuff that he didn't think made sense in Allen's telling. And he started by trying to find the house. He started trying to find the house of the boy. And he pretty quickly found out that no one that matched the information that he had lived in Mount Rainier at the address that I mentioned earlier. And that just seems to not match. Like, he found everyone that had ever lived at that house in the time period that this could have possibly happened. And no one had any children at that time that lived there. He searched neighbors. He even found that there was like a rezoning of stuff at some point in history, and found what the address that it would have been at that time, and double checked that as well, and found out that there was just no record of this boy existing at that place.
That is fucking weird that nobody would have had kids in that like area. Like, not a single family?
Well, like in the house, and then in the places that it would.
Yeah, that's still crazy.
It wasn't like in the whole neighborhood or anything. It was just in the houses that could have been the one that was referenced. But
you'd think that like one of like, I don't know, 4 houses or whatever, you would run into a family. That's wild.
Yeah. So he did find he went back to some sources, and basically he found that the Schultz, the first church member priest guy that they talked to, the parish that he worked for was in Mount Rainier, but that was a parish that was visited by some surrounding areas. It wasn't just people directly around there that went to it. And he over time found a place in another suburb called Cottage City that started to line up. So he seemed to find the person. As far as I can tell, the actual person that was the inspiration for The Exorcist is known today. We know the person, we know who they were, and we have the basic rundown of the timeline of events and everything. But, who knows? Because I think we do know. I think I can say we do know for sure. And this guy found it, Mark Obsasnik. He never actually identified the child or family by name. He just used the pseudonym Roland or John Doe throughout most of the article that he published. But he did give some information, including some of the census books he used to cross-check information, various municipal directories and libraries he had used to verify information about the family and the address. But his main sticking point was a lot of the kind of supernatural claims associated with the story. And he basically went at this with a kind of debunker's mindset, trying to question the more supernatural elements of this, along with the kind of logical leaps made by Alan that he didn't think lined up exactly. And he found some stuff that didn't line up. And the funny thing about this that I feel like I should impress before we fully deconstruct this thing is in the documentary that I was talking about. I forget what it's called. It's got a really dramatic title, like In the Claws of the Devil or some shit. Like it's something kind of dramatic. They talk to neighbors of the house that Alan identified from the time, and like people are like on record saying, "Oh yeah, I remember there was like there were reports of this kid falling ill or being hush hush with this stuff for a while," and like it is just entirely not a thing. Like they could not be right. It's just this weird thing where it like they almost like memed this into existence, and I mean that in like the original use of the word, not like internet meme. I
mean, just by the story spreading, it became true. Like people just like their memories changed to adapt to that sort of. Okay, interesting.
Because like it straight up like because I had to start checking stories about this stuff from before and after certain dates to try to get any sense of when people knew what and what was happening when, because there's like this shift once Obsasnik's information comes out that is kind of a trickle out, because it came out in like a small regional Fortean magazine originally that had a small press and didn't have a lot of reach. And so like until the internet started to push it heavier and more people started to be able to cross-check that information, there's a reason why the more fantastical story has stuck around the way it has, because of those factors. It's kind of this is a weird one to try to unravel, because what we come to effectively is Obsasnik basically just thinks that this kid was playing tricks on people and was kind of a dick. Like was just being difficult and playing pranks on people, and it got out of hand.
That's okay. Here's the two things that seem to come up with these exorcism stories is either the person had some sort of untreated mental illness or some sort of illness, some psychological thing going on. But the other thing that I find with, and this is just like, not just like possessions and exorcisms, but also just like hauntings and poltergeist activity, is just kids being dicks. Like, think about it. How many stories that we've covered where it's just like, yeah, the two children, like, we're very obviously, like, they get one proper researcher in who's not, like, totally, like, credulous about the paranormal. Yeah. And they're just like, the children are fucking... as soon as you turn your back, they're throwing vases. You know, it's like... Yeah, that's...
And
so
if you want to read all of Obsasnik's kind of dig in this step by step, it's the whole original 1999 article is available on Strange Magazine's website. The 2000 follow up that I think I have some information that was pulled from that is behind a paywall. But you can read the entirety of the like 5 full internet page thing. That's actually really interesting the way he went about this. Because he started with basically trying to find the place. So he's basically found out that the exorcism did not take place at 3210 Bunker Hill Road in Mount Rainier, Maryland. The boy had never lived in Mount Rainier. It was actually in Cottage City, Maryland. Much of the commonly accepted information about the story is based on hearsay and was never really fact-checked or properly documented. There is no evidence that Father E. Albert Hughes had actually ever visited the boy's home or had him admitted to the hospital where the first exorcism supposedly took place. And they also did found no record that he had made the boy become restrained. I think there were records that the boy had spent some time at this hospital at the time, but there were no records that like the level of
that he had to be like that fucking strapped down.
Happened. Yeah. There's also no there's nothing that proves that he actually was injured during the exorcism attempt. And however, there is ample evidence that goes against the claims of one of the later priests suffering an emotional breakdown and disappearing from the community. Basically, he started to find that everything was way more dramatic than anyone could actually verify in any real way, including the ability for the boy to speak Latin. He basically got people to say that after some time that what it's actually sounded like was the kid was basically trying to copy stuff that people had said during Catholic masses. Like he wasn't just all of a sudden speaking fluent, perfect Latin in like novel sentence structures. He was trying to sound Latin-ish from stuff he remembered from mass. Is the way, if you believe the debunker's account.
Here's the thing though, I just want to say, we're not a debunker podcast. That's not what we're about. But you do this long enough and patterns start to emerge. It's like how a cryptid sighting happens that stirs a town, and certain people in the town realize that that's kind of good for business in various ways, usually like tourism, media picks up on it. And then people start coming out of the woodwork to say, oh, well, I definitely saw the Jersey Devil or Bigfoot or whatever. And so it's like the same sort of phenomenon, just with the more spiritual paranormal lean to it, I guess. It's all this, it just keeps happening, it's, and it grows as it keeps happening. So,
yeah. So there's a little bit here that I have here about how he kind of checked some stuff, but it's kind of, it's only interesting as if you're interested in how he fact checks and found the boy's birthday and a neighbor to check stuff with. But basically he went through a bunch of fucking clerical records of the time period and property deeds and newspapers and microfiche and shit, and found all of these things together and basically found his actual address, the actual address of the place that he lived as a kid, which I have here. It's in Cottage City, Maryland. I'm not going to give any further, but you can find it if you really want it. However, in the 1999 Strange magazine article, he chose not to reveal the boy's actual identity for quote unquote a number of legal reasons. But he did give out like the childhood address and some clues, so people were, I went and found I found articles from as early as 2005 that just had his whole legal fucking name on them.
Jeez.
Like it did not take long for people to piece the information together. After this article started getting spread, it didn't take long for people to figure this out.
Now,
however, there are people.
Now, in this article, I'm not gonna give any names. I'm not gonna, for legal reasons, I'm not gonna say anything about like who this kid was. But I would if I could. So here's the next best thing.
Yeah, it really this is on such a weird like moral ground for me of like, should we actually know what happened in this boy's life that somehow just because it was picked up by a writer who then led to the creation of this movie, like that doesn't actually give us any moral leg to stand on in terms of finding out all about this kid. Mm-hmm. But it is an interesting story. So the line is very strange for me.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I guess as far as I'm concerned, it's like the information's out there and in like, I don't know. It like, I feel like his home address is whatever, but I don't know. I wouldn't be too concerned about it. It seems like the spot's kind of blown up, huh?
Yeah. So after Obsasnik stuff came out, another person named Rueda, where's his first name? Sergio Rueda wrote a book I believe that it came out in like 2018 called Diabolical Possession and the Case Behind the Exorcist, which takes a lot of the kind of, this is where we start getting the side of this. Okay. The weirdest thing about this whole story is that there's a point in time where a guy goes in, finds out that a lot of the stuff we know about the case is wrong, and a lot of stuff has been probably exaggerated by people and can't be verified. And he straight up figures out who the kid actually is, where he lived, and tried to contact him straight up, like called this guy's house and was asked not to call again. And then to this day, right? Like in this fucking year that we're in, there is a Discovery Plus documentary that either came out at the end of last year or in this specific year about the story, but telling the version that just now has some details that were fixed by Obsasnik, but telling the full-blown, very sensationalized exorcism version. So like there was this moment where it felt like someone had just kind of poked a bunch of holes in this case, and then people who wanted to make money off of The Exorcist and also like make content have just decided that doesn't really matter, because if you just look up The Exorcism of Roland Doe on the internet, if you just Google this stuff, you're going to find from 2021, December 2021, articles from a place called the Skeptical Inquirer and The Guardian that reported the supposed true identity of Roland Doe / Robbie Mannheim. I have his full name here. You can find it online if you want. Turns out he was a NASA engineer. We'll talk more about it in a second.
What the fuck?
We'll talk about that in a second. So there are places, even Wikipedia cites this place as the person, as like where the name came out, when you can find people figuring it out as early as 2005, but they didn't report it in a flashy enough way, I guess, that it got like put into the public record. So it's technically true that those places did report it, but they are both citing a podcast investigation that is based on Obsasnik's work, but just disregards a lot of the information that to some degree disregards the information that it might all be made up. But then they're like credited for it. So it's like, it puts this really weird credibility on things that doesn't feel earned on anyone's part. And it's just fucking weird.
It's very modern internet, you know, like people kind of like using this pre-existing work and, you know, making sure it's a bit stripped down and more sensationalized, and multiple people just grabbing credits from different places. And it's
because there are multiple podcasts in the last couple of years that get cited in these things, in these articles, along with like that is the Skeptical Inquirer and Guardian Posts are citing podcasts that did like 6-part series on this case, and kind of mainly talked about the sensationalized version, and then kind of put an afternote of like, a guy says maybe the kid was just misbehaved.
Look at it this way.
You know?
The Guardian's going to have to cite us now if they ever want to do an article on this again. And, you know, that just makes, you know, we've had these weird ass fucking internet articles just use our shit without ever telling us.
True.
So, like, we're probably going to get on somebody's listicle somewhere by doing this anyways. So,
yeah. Hey, look, there's no such thing as
just
bad
how
press,
it works these days.
So because the guy died on May 10th, 2020, the name of the guy is Ronald Edwin Hunkler. I forgot he was actually dead, so we can talk about him. This is he was a NASA engineer who actually patented a special technology to make space shuttle panels resistant to extreme heat, which helped the Apollo missions of the 1960s put astronauts on the moon.
Did
so
Satan
he ended up having like
that one in his mind
an actual
for,
life.
Or?
Yeah, I think Satan gave him how better to learn how to withstand extreme heat than to witness Saint Michael battling the devil in a glorious sword battle in hell.
And like, you know, everybody knows NASA's all tied up with that Satan shit. You know, they're the devil's there somewhere. We all know this. And how else do you think they're, you know, Werner von Braun's getting Nazis on the moon and shit? They gotta invoke the good old devil himself.
Yep. So what I think is really funny is they called him for a long time Roland Doe, and his first actual name is Ronald.
Yeah.
So they straight up just was like, flip That's good enough.
Yeah.
Let's go. So yeah, he lived a full life. And his identity was kind of an open secret amongst a community of Jesuits in St. Louis for like 30 years. According to someone who had known Hunkler for 29 years, he was always on edge about his colleagues at the NASA Goddard Space Flight Center finding out that he was the inspiration for The Exorcist. He spent nearly 40 years working at NASA and retired in 2001. But then here are some quotes from that partner. On Halloween, we always left the house because he figured someone would come to his residence and know where he lived and never let him have peace. He had a terrible life from worry. Supposedly he was kind of estranged from some of his family. And he told his companion, supposedly, later on in life, he said that he never believed himself to be a victim of satanic possession, and he shunned religion. He said he wasn't possessed. It was all concocted. He said, I was just a bad boy.
Oh my God.
But the thing is, like, there's also in the same in the same interview right up next, shortly before Hunkler died, a Catholic priest appeared at his home to perform last rites, she recalled. And she added that she did not call the priest. I have no idea how the father knew to come, but he got Ron to heaven. Ron's in heaven and he's with God now. And that could be entirely apocryphal. I don't know. But there are also sources, especially before Obsasnik, like Thomas Allen said that he was like a devout Catholic for the rest of his life. And that seems to be basically just not true. Mm-hmm. There are multiple things in the Allen recounting that have been debunked now. And a lot of other things are pretty, kind of, they've been overly sensationalized now. Like if you read some of the accounts of that you can find from like the last couple of years of people telling the account of the exorcism, even more wild shit's happening. Like he's like levitating and shit. Like there's the stuff from the movie has started to bleed into the case because it is so people like the movie so much. It has just bled into everything. Yeah.
Man.
Yeah. So it's weird that there are like two decent sized documentaries that straight up identify the wrong house that the boy never lived in, talk to his neighbors, and hear the stories about all this stuff. And they just still exist. You can go watch them. They have a lot of wrong information in them now, but they might be interesting. But there's one other little tangent of this story, and this is actually what got me onto this story. Because back for this, we have to go all the way back to 1949, back when the exorcisms were actually happening. The first like newspaper articles are being written about this, and it's starting to become a thing in this area. Because does the name J.B. Rhine ring any bells for you?
Yes.
Yes. So while J.B. Rhine was working at the Duke Parapsychology Laboratory.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
He was written by Schultz, Luther M. Schultz, the first person that was contacted by the family.
Yes.
Luther Schultz sent some information to J.B. Rhine, who was working at the Duke Parapsychology Laboratory, which was active from 1935 until the 60s. And we have that. I have just here a letter back and forth between J.B. Rhine and Luther Schultz.
Now, just
you can find these online.
Just for context, I did like 3 episodes on parapsychology. I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years ago, something like that.
Something like that. Yeah.
And J.B. Rhine's in there for sure.
Yeah, he's like one of the like big wigs.
He's
of
like
this
from
era
the
of
golden
parapsychology.
age almost, or like the end of the golden age ish.
Yeah. So he was kind of consulted on this case, and they tried to actually go down there and witness some of the events, because there is an alternate parapsychological explanation for this exorcism. He believed that it might have actually been a poltergeist, and that was what he was going down to try to go and get some information about. Unfortunately, he basically got word that something was happening, and he and someone else that worked at the parapsychological laboratory kind of tried to go down to where the events were happening, and it had ceased to be doing anything by the time they got there. So he, despite being quote unquote deeply interested in this case, and saying that the most likely normal explanation is that the boy is himself led to create the effect of being the victim of mysterious agencies or forces, and might be sincerely convinced of it. Such movements as those of the chair and bed might, from your very brief account of them, have originated within himself. So he was a bit skeptical, but he also thought that if it were something of supernatural origin, that a poltergeist would explain a lot of the things they were seeing quite well. So instead of being possessed, it might have been a poltergeist.
It's so funny how the parapsychologist people are just like, well, let's be rational about this. I don't think it's a demonic possession. If anything, it's a ghostly poltergeist, which they have this like internal like scientific sounding logic about like how like what that is, like what ectoplasm is and stuff. But you're still doing paranormal, nonsense at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So
what's fun is I found, you can find copies of the actual letters. The Duke, some division of Duke's library or something has a website that just has like an article write up on this thing because of its ties to The Exorcist. And they've published in full like copies of the 2 letters, and you can download them. I have one of them sitting right here. It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
They have a little write up that ends with basically that in the mid 1960s, Duke and J.B. Rhine parted ways, and the Duke Parapsychology Lab closed. This was likely due in part to the fact that despite Rhine's extensive research and empirical testing, parapsychology was and still is considered a dubious pseudoscience.
Yeah, that's kind of how it all went down. Now they mostly do stuff through Twitter.
Yeah. Now, and when I was like trying to refresh on J.B. Rhine's whole steez, I found a thing on his Wikipedia page that I just figure might be a fun ending to this episode. Arthur Conan Doyle published an article in a Boston
I know what
newspaper
this is,
claiming,
but go ahead.
J.B. Ryan is an ass.
Yeah. Yep.
So yeah, take that for as you will.
And Arthur Conan Doyle was like in a parapsychological association at one point. I think the London-based one, but they did not like each other. I don't know what the like backstory is there, but there was a lot of infighting among parapsychology and like what the methods were supposed to be and theories. Like there are some people who would be die hard on the like possession hypothesis, and somebody being like, it's clearly not that, it's a poltergeist would ruffle their feathers in a big way. So
yeah.
Oh yeah. Wow. Amazing. I did not know. I feel like I was told this story, but I was definitely told like a different, more sensational story. I was told a story that like the Exorcist, the story was based off of like almost mapped in many ways 1-to-1 with the real life story. Like I remember hearing like a priest died.
I don't believe any priest died during the actual exorcisms. They died after.
A Catholic priest lying. Who'd have thunk?
Yeah. So now, oh fuck! I just realized. So there was a bit of a spotlight situation with Maryland Catholic priests recently.
Oh God.
That they reached back. I'm curious if anyone involved in the exorcism of Roland Doe was fucking listed in the lawsuits for the Maryland Catholicism.
Oh boy,
Catholic Church. Anyway, that's a weird dark note. So let's end with a big question instead. So if you had to choose between life's two great pastimes to do for the rest of your life, would you prefer to be a parapsychologist or a Catholic exorcist?
Are you? It's the easiest choice in the world, a parapsychologist. Like, at least I did get to do something that looks like research and doesn't associate with the Catholic Church necessarily. Like, I'm doing parapsychology. There was like levels of like, there were people who were like not total debunkers, but there were people in there who were like highly skeptical and like trying to eliminate all fraud so that they could get down to like, this is the real deal. So I don't know. I mean, like, at bare minimum, I'm not interacting with the Catholic Church, and that's very important to me. So
yeah, I think that's a core tenet that we can just kind of
both agree on that
podcast.
Yeah.
I'm not going to. I'm going to pick that. I'm joining the parapsychology, even though parapsychology isn't a thing that is like actively pursued much anymore. But I think we can bring it back.
They have a whole fucking. I think Parapsychology of London has a Twitter account that follows our podcast. So,
oh shit,
they're they're still doing stuff. They're not like. And I think there's another one. So like one of the most active parapsychology encyclopedias online, the like organization behind it is, I think, the currently most active or most, I don't know what the term is, the most member having parapsychology organization that's currently active. But, you go back to the episodes, you'll find that shit got split into a whole bunch of, I don't know, beliefs and people.
Yeah.
And like locations. It was all over the place. So I don't know.
Got heavily splintered.
Yeah, let's start a lab together. How about that?
Yeah. All right. We'll start off the It Gets Weird Parapsychology Institute.
Perfect.
The IGWI.
Yes.
IGPWI?
IGPWI.
I don't know.
IGPWI.
We'll go with something like that. So yeah. Do you want to take care of some business?
Sounds good to me.
All right. So if you want to follow us on social media, we're on Twitter at IGW Podcast.
You can follow us on Facebook.com/ItGetsWeirdPodcast.
And we're on all your favorite podcatchers, from Stitcher to Google Play to Apple Podcasts to Spotify. If you listen to podcasts somewhere, look up It Gets Weird, and we're probably there.
Check us out, twitch.tv/ItGetsWeird. We like to stream sometimes, so give us a follow there. And if you want to email us, guess what? We have an email, itgetsweirdpodcast@gmail.com. Send us emails. We love to read them. We've been getting a lot of emails from people trying to promote their anti-vaccine shit and things like that recently. So I'd love to get some more variety in the inbox after having to open up multiple things like that. So please, there's a whole genre of email that we get of like somebody who's like, please interview me. I want to promote something really fucked up. and I look at their email and I go, you have not listened to a single second of the show. You do not know what we're about. So yeah, please email us. Patreon.com/itgetsweird. We have a $2 tier and a $5 tier. At the $2 tier, you get access to the show. I mentioned at the top of the episode, It Gets Weird TV, where we're watching the X-Files right now, season 1. And the listeners, the patron donors, they get to vote on what weird show that we watch. So once X-Files is up, you can vote on that if you donate. And you get access to our show about it, where we discuss weird television. That comes out every other Thursday. Then at the $5 tier, you get access to It Gets Weird TV, plus another bonus show on the off weeks of It Gets Weird TV. So you're getting a bonus episode, bonus content every single week. Whether you donate to the $2 tier or the $5 tier, you get access to the main show 2 days early on Friday instead of Sunday. And you get access to the Discord where we're hanging out talking about all kinds of weird shit. We also have a $1 tier where you don't get anything out of it except the satisfaction of kicking a little tip to your favorite weird podcast. If you can't donate, please tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell your congressman all about It Gets Weird podcast.
All right. Thank you all for hanging out and listening to the podcast. Keep telling all your friends about it. This has been It Gets Weird, and I've been Nile.
And I'm Kyle, signing out.
Peace.